ग्लोबल स्किल डेवलपमेंट मिशन में आपका स्वागत है।
All right, so we know that there's a seemingly endless supply of typefaces available, but we need a way to whittle down the number of choices to just a small set of typefaces that we want to use. I call this establishing a typeface hierarchy, or simply choosing a small set of fonts that we want to use for our layout, for our design. We've already determined the design's message. We've already asked our boss or our clients a series of questions, so we know exactly what it is that the design is trying to communicate. And all of that information up front is going to help us to cut down on the number of choices that we have to make as far as the typefaces are concerned. And selecting fonts really can be an overwhelming topic, but quite honestly, there are many great designers out there that have based their entire career around using just a small set of perhaps 20, 30, maybe 50 fonts. That's it. So that, again, helps them really whittle down the number of choices that they have to make. And as we work along here, I'm going to share with you a few tried and true principles that we have to help us establish this set of typefaces that we want to use. As you can see here, I'm sitting inside Adobe Illustrator. It really, truthfully, doesn't matter what graphics application you want to use. You could use Photoshop, you could use InDesign for this process of choosing a typeface hierarchy. I'm using Illustrator only because I like it a lot. I'm fast. I can work quickly inside it, and it's going to help me demonstrate this process of selecting a typeface hierarchy with you. So what we want to do is we want to type in some kind of text into our graphics application that supports the design's message. So it doesn't have to be taken directly, perhaps, from the text that's been supplied to us. It could be something that we make up on our own. You could use some kind of placeholder text. We could just come in here and type in placeholder or something like that, or, perhaps some lorem ipsum or something like that. But I find that it's actually easier for me, and it encourages a little bit of creativity on my part if I actually use real text that's been pulled out of the layout or has something to do with the overall design's message. Okay? So the text that I'm going to throw in here, this is going to be for a fictitious bakery, coffee shop type place. So the fictitious text that I'm going to type in here is going to be warm, cozy comfort. There we go, something like that. Okay, and again, it's supporting the design's message. Maybe this is going to be for a website. Maybe it's going to be for a flyer for this fictitious bakery. Who knows? But this is the text that we're going to throw in here. What I want to make sure of as well is that my tracking and my kerning and my leading are all set to auto. I don't want anything kind of wacky going on here. Okay, and this is all inside the character panel. And by the way, a quick aside, I'm not assuming that you know how to use Illustrator, that you know how to use Photoshop or InDesign, and I'm ripping through the sort of the nuts and bolts of how to use these applications very quickly, because this is really related to graphic design and specifically choosing a set of typefaces that we want to work with, not how to go and do this stuff inside a particular application. Okay? All right, so we have a little bit of text in here now. What I now want to do is I want to start finding some typefaces that support the message. In my case, warm, cozy comfort, or this fictitious coffee shop / bakery that I'm creating this layout for. So inside the list of typefaces that I have here, I want to try and find some fonts that support this message. As I say, here's an example of what I don't mean. Here's a font that I just happened to eyeball here as I'm talking along. I have a font here. It's another comic book font installed on my machine called Damn Noisy Kids. This does not support warm, cozy comfort. It has nothing to do with warm, cozy comfort. It does not work in the least. So again, what I want to do is I want to try and find something that kind of ties into the feeling, the message that I'm trying to evoke. Okay, there's that Bada Boom font that I mentioned earlier on. That's not helping at all either. So perhaps something like this guy here, I'm not even 100% sure how to pronounce that. Chancery, Apple Chancery, something like that. Okay, that's not bad, something like that. So what I'll do is I'll pull that guy up towards the top of my screen. Sometimes what I'll do is I'll have a scrap piece of paper in front of me and I'll jot down the name of the font. Or sometimes what I'll do is I'll simply duplicate out the font and then I'll go and find another one that perhaps may support this feeling that I'm going for. Okay, so maybe I'll give you maybe a handful of ideas as we work our way along here. Maybe something like Bondi would work, Bondi Book, maybe something like that. I want to give the feeling of warmth and, of course, comfort, and that's what I'm looking for inside the typefaces, okay, as I'm working my way through the list of typefaces, okay? So as I'm making my way through my list of typefaces, I'm asking myself, does this typeface support my overall message? Is it working for the overall message, okay? And something else that I want to mention as well as I'm working my way through my list of fonts is I want to try and find fonts that have a lot of options, okay? You noticed here I just chose Mona Lisa. Mona Lisa Solid. That's it. There's no Mona Lisa Solid Bold or Italics or anything like that. But, for example, Minion Pro, I could go with Minion Pro and look at all the options that we have here. Look at the font family, as we know that it's called. So there's condensed, there's bold, condensed, italic, regular, italic, medium, medium italic, semi-bold, and all the way on, right? So I have a lot of options in here, which I like. I like having a lot of choices, okay? Same idea with some of the other guys that we have here. What is this guy called? Party LET? Well, that's kind of whimsical and kind of decorative, and that might work maybe for a logo, or maybe if I'm going to design this coffee shop's menu, maybe something like that would work, but I really don't have a whole lot of options. I have Party LET plain. That's it. I have no bold, I have no italics, no alternative versions for this font. So keep this in mind as you're working through your list of typefaces. The other thing I want to mention is that you should be creative. Try doing something that's unexpected. For example, if you're designing something for a Greek restaurant, don't use Lithos. If I can find Lithos in my list of fonts here. There he is, Lithos Pro. Let's go black here. That's very Greek looking. If I'm designing a menu for a Greek menu, it's almost a cliche, if that makes sense. It's too expected, right? Or if I'm going to be designing something that's maybe the feeling for the design is the ancient Middle East. Well, using papyrus, which is in here somewhere, there he is, papyrus, it's too obvious. It's too easy of a choice. I want to use something that's a little bit more creative, a little bit more unexpected, but I don't want to go too far outside of the box, okay? So by the end of this process, typically what will wind up happening is I'll have a set of maybe 5, maybe 10 different fonts that I can choose from, and then for me it turns into a process of elimination. Which of these 5 typefaces that I've selected express or communicate the message of the overall design the best? Okay? Now, from that point, what we want to do is we want to start building combinations of fonts, and this can be tricky because all these fonts need to not only work well together, but they still need to convey the design's message. You're probably not sure what I mean when I say building a combination of fonts. What I mean is, for instance, this idea of a hierarchy, a top-level font, a level 1 font, if that makes sense, a level 2 font, a level 3 font. And what winds up happening is if we use too many fonts, then we're just confusing the viewer and giving them too much information. Quite honestly, myself, I try to stick with 2 fonts for my overall design, maybe a 3rd font, okay? So let me give you a quick example here. Maybe what I'll do is I'll get rid of this text here, and I'll type in some new text here. I'm going to go level 1. Whoops, there we go. And I'm still on the dreaded papyrus. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to try and find a font that communicates the overall message of warm, cozy, comfort, bakery. Think of the smell of fresh baking bread or fresh pie in the oven. That's what I'm trying to communicate. What font will help me communicate that? Well, here's a font that we saw earlier on, and I kind of latched onto it. If I can find it in my list of fonts here. He's in here somewhere if I can find him. There he is right there, Bickham Script. And what I like about Bickham Script is he's going to help me communicate this idea of comfort and warmth, but he also has a variety of options here as well. So I'm going to go with Bickham Script Bold, and we're going to wind up with something like this. And I think that's really going to help me out here, okay? And then what I'll do is I'll duplicate this guy, and this guy is going to become level 2, as you might guess. And what I want to do is I want to try and find a font that's going to work with the level 1 font. Okay, this is what I mean about setting up this structure or this hierarchy. Okay, the second font that I want to use is going to wind up being a font called Baskerville, which I happened to eyeball earlier as well. Baskerville, and again, I have lots and lots of options here for the Baskerville font family. Okay, so I'm going to go with regular, and then I'll crank this guy way down, perhaps something like this. Okay, so the more you do this, obviously, the better you get at it. Here's a few tricks or a few tips that may help you along. Typically, what I'll do is I'll use a decorative font or a script font for a logo. Not always, but oftentimes. And then for the top level font, usually what I wind up doing is I usually wind up using a serif font. We know all about serif fonts already. These rules aren't hard and fast. Obviously, this is a script font, not a serif font. But again, just guidelines here. So a serif font for the top level, and then a sans serif font for the second level heading. Okay? The other thing that I wanted to mention is if you have body text, paragraphs of text, if that text is going to wind up online or in some kind of digital format, oftentimes I will use a sans serif font. It's easier to read text, paragraphs of text on screen if it's being displayed in a sans serif typeface. But if that same text is going to wind up in print, it's actually easier to read serif text on paper or in print. In any regard, there you go. There's a look at how we can start to structure and create our typeface hierarchy.